Okay, so this week I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of natural law morality. Natural law, let me start again. Natural law morality is the official doctrine of the Catholic Church. So if you want to know what the official ethical doctrine, philosophy, Catholicism is, it is natural law morality. And essentially, what natural law morality is doing is saying that when we look at to find what is good, what is right, what we ought to do, we can look to nature. That in nature, the moral laws are actually inscribed within nature. They're actually found there. Just by observing nature and natural beings, we can discover what it is that they ought to be and what it is that we ought to do. And that this is just part of how we're constructed, how we're designed. So very often this is a theological, so a God-based moral theory, and very often the idea is that God, an all-good, all-wise, all-loving creator, has made moral laws and designed them into nature. And so you don't necessarily have to be religious to understand what you ought to do. You just have to be observant. You just have to think about what is right. And so, for example, the classic example would be that the purpose of an acorn is to grow into an oak tree, not a maple tree or a pine tree or a birch tree. That the purpose of that acorn, what it is naturally designed to do, is to become an oak tree. And if conditions are right, and if it doesn't, if there's no accidents that happen, like it gets stepped on or something, if there's enough water, enough moisture, that's what'll happen. Eventually, it'll become an oak tree. Same thing with like a tadpole. A tadpole is meant to become a frog, not anything else, not another animal. And so within every part of nature, there are designs that it is meant to become. Within human beings, they generally identify four categories that human beings are meant to develop. One is this idea of preservation, self-preservation. That life is good. It's based on this idea that life is good, that we want to preserve our lives, that we don't want to die, that we're naturally inclined to survive. And so, this can mean things like don't smoke, don't become obese, exercise, because that's part of surviving, part of flourishing. Another kind of fundamental goal is this idea of procreation, furthering the human species. If life is good, it's not just that our life is good, it is that life in general is good, and that each species has a desire to procreate, to continue the species. And so, things like this is where heterosexual sex would be okay, but not homosexual sex, or certainly heterosexual sex that is non-reproductive would not be considered immoral. And there's also the idea of raising your child properly, not just having kids, but raising them so that they can flourish and they can become productive members of society. There's also the idea of sociability. Sociability is very much based on the idea that we're meant to be in relationships with others. That's part of what it means to be human. That to be human is to develop relationships with others, and that actions and behaviors and characteristics which promote relationships are good, and those which don't are bad. And then finally, human beings are naturally driven to know. That we want to understand the world, that we want to understand truth. And this is fundamental for a human being. That's what we're designed to do, one of the things we're designed to do. And so certainly ignorance would be a negative, and education and knowledge would be a positive. And so these are the kind of things that a natural law moralist, ethicist, would say that we ought to develop. These are qualities that we as individuals and that society should support furthering and flourishing and growing. And a society and individuals that do that are good, and those that don't are bad. And that again is natural law, and there is it's not a consequentialist moral theory in the sense that look, there's certain things, these four goods, these four goals are good, they're right no matter what, not to be sacrificed for beneficial consequences to others. but not quite as strict a deontology, absolutist, as a Kantian deontology, because we have to figure out, okay, if these are the four goals, how do they interact with each other, how do they relate with each other, and there can be more flexibility there. And so that's natural law. Enjoy it and look forward to reading your posts as always.